But thank you so much for everybody being here this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you join us again soon, and tell your friends about us so they can also join us. Before we start the program, I'd like to introduce Father Ron Walters with our evening prayer. Father Walters.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Walters. I really appreciate your participation in the shows and everything that you do for us. So thank you so much. Well, I need to make a few announcements here. I want to thank Martin Breckfield, NMRA, for including our show in his magazine, O-Scale Trains. We don't pay him for that. He does it, I guess, because he thinks it's of interest to his readers, and I really appreciate him voluntarily including our programs in his magazine. So, Martin, thank you so much. I have asked the Achievement Program Chairman, Frank Koch, if we can give points for the author certificate for the people doing presentations on our shows. And I have not heard back from him. I asked him a couple of weeks ago. I sent him another email today, and I'll keep pushing until I finally get an answer one way or another. I don't know whether they'll approve them or not, but rather than just give them to everybody and let everybody fight the battle themselves, I figured, well, I'll just get the decision made on the front end before we go any further with this. Pat Rivard is the one that came up with this idea and asked me why we weren't doing it. And I said, I don't have a reason. I just never thought of it before. So now that Pat's brought it up, we're going to investigate it and see if we can give you credit for your author certificate in the Achievement Program that the NMRA runs. And I'll let you know as soon as I hear something. I also want to talk about our scholarship very briefly. There's nothing really new to talk about. We're about to open a bank account. And once we get the bank account open, that'll be our last step. We've gotten all of the federal, all of the state approvals that we need. So all of that's behind us. All of the fees that we had to pay to the state and local governments, those have been paid. So the last thing that we have to do before we can start accepting funds for our 501c3 is to open our bank account and get that settled on how we're going to collect the funds and where we're going to put them for that scholarship. For the current year, for the one that closes out July the 1st, our $1,000 scholarship, all we're looking for right now are applicants. And we want to try to get as many people possible as we can knowledgeable about our scholarship this year, since it's the first year that we've been able to do this. And if they're interested and can apply and they're eligible, then we want them to certainly apply and compete for the scholarship. So if you know of a high school graduate or somebody that just recently has graduated from high school, who's a model railroader, wants to continue in a STEAM program, either a science, engineering, technology, mathematics, or art degrees in college or university or a technical school, then please have them apply for our $1,000 scholarship. Anything that we can do to help the young people in their education who are model railroaders, that's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. So we're not having a modeling lifestyle this week. The person that we had scheduled just couldn't do it, so that we had to cancel. So the next one we have coming up is on the 30th of this month, and I'll talk about that more later. The build-alongs that we have coming up, we have 3 of them that I'll talk about in a minute. Inkscape, Father Ron is doing this one starting the 29th of this month, 29th of March. And that's a kind of a CAD program, but I understand it's very simple that even I might be able to use. So I'm looking forward to Father Ron helping us with that. Then Touch Toggles is going to do one starting the April the 19th show. Kevin will be here briefly this evening to talk about what he's going to be doing on that build along. And I'm looking forward to what Kevin's going to say. Kevin's got a nice discount for you, by the way, on that. And then Tom York on May the 10th. We got Tom to agree to come out of retirement for us and produce a kit, 25 copies of it. Total cost to you, delivered to your front door, $40. And he's going to build it live on our shows. And if you have any questions, then just ask him and he'll help you with it. He tells me that he's going to concentrate on painting and weathering of the kit because he thinks that that's what people might have the most difficulty with. And the rest of it should not be a problem for anybody to build and complete the kit. We also have the MyBuild coming up tonight, is our March segment. But next month, on the 26th of April, we're going to have a special one that's going to try to concentrate on scenery and you can include structures, you can include trains, whatever you want to, but include some scenery in it. That's what we're going to try to concentrate that MyBuild on in April. So with that said, let me start the show tonight. And I don't know whether Hank Primus is here tonight. He just had his train show and he may be a little tired and not able to join us. But Phil is going to do a quick tip and continue his discussion of the signage that he makes. So Phil, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jim. I had to get things right on my computer here. It just always takes a moment. So tonight we're going to continue kind of this discussion. I think, this really is kind of more of a discussion, quite frankly, than it is just a pure presentation clinic. Because one of the things I knew going into this was a number of you use these tools in similar ways I do or different ways. So it's a great opportunity just to have a discussion about that. So what I want to do now is just talk a little about how to sketch in PowerPoint. And tonight's going to be a little different as a presentation because I'm going to only have a couple of slides. We're going to start moving away from using slides and moving more into actually, doing the presentation. So what I wanted to do tonight is start by trying to draw two different objects. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to draw first this crossing sign, and we want to figure out if we wanted to print that, how would we draw that to print these two arms of the crossing sign? How would we scale them and how would we do that? The second thing that I wanted to do was look at how we would do a logo for our kind of private railroad that was designed around something like the Missouri Pacific lines here. So the idea is to use that kind of as not a prototype and try to do it exactly, but do something similar for maybe we're going to do the Central Pacific lines or the Western Pacific lines or something like that for our private railroad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the slideshow here. And what I'm going to do, I want to pull over here just a new presentation. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put over here a blank presentation. This is a screen I'm sharing over here. And again, what we did last week, we want to go into design. We want to go into slide size. We want to go into custom slide size. And we're going to go ahead and do this on letter paper just because we can. I think it's easy. We'll leave it in landscape. But that way, if we want to print it, it's easy to print it out and look at what we've done. If I come up here to home, so the home key is where you want to be most of the time. If you'll notice on home, if I'm clicked on a slide, I can go to layout and I can get rid of these things on the slide by putting a blank slide template up. Just a really simple thing. So this is a template. Now, one of the things that I did was I went on back into when I was looking for this and I found a sign, and we'll talk about how to find these things. But this is a sign schematic design I found online, which says, how are you going to build a railroad sign? So it says this should be 9 feet above there and that, but I really don't care about that. What I really care about is this right here. It says it's 48 inches for the length of the sign, and it's 9 inches in terms of width. So what we want to do is we want to build a sign that's that size. Now we really, even though there's a black line around the outside of this, we actually know that when we go to print this and cut it out, we don't want a black line there. So I want to think about that, because what that says is what we're going to build, we need to be able to figure out a way to cut it out and make it look good. And we'll talk about how to do that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put in the railroad crossing. So obviously we put in our caps lock, railroad, and then we've got a space, some spaces, and we've got road on the other side. So that's our first sign. Now, we know how long we want that sign to be. So we're on a page here, so we've got to figure out on our page, and let's just assume we're going to print this 8.5 by 11. We're going to print this 8.5 by 11. How long does our sign have to be if we're printing it for, let's just do O scale because it's a little easier for me because I understand O. So if you know it's going to be 4 feet long in O scale, and we know we want to print that on a sheet of paper that's going to come out, it's going to be 1 inch long. So we want to make our sign 1 inch long. So if we look up here at the top, you notice we've got a scale up there. We can see that's probably going to be too long for that. So let's make it a little smaller font. So we come up here. This is your font control little window up here. Make the font a little smaller. Now, one of the things is when we do that, when we make it smaller, we may want to zoom in on it a little bit better so we can see it. Now, the other question that we want to ask is the font we have here for railroad good for what we have over here? And what's interesting is it actually looks pretty good. This is the Calibri font that they use. It looks pretty close, but one of the things you can do, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this today, and I guess I have the one that I did before that has this in it. I go look for it. But you can go through all of the different fonts here and see if there's one that you like better. I think Arial is pretty close on this one as well. One of the other ones I found was, I think the Barlow was pretty good for this. The Barlow, and you don't want the condensed, you actually want the non-condensed version of Barlow. And there's some others. So we'll just pick one of them, because for what we want to do today, it's good enough to just pick one, and we'll go ahead and just stick with an Arial here. We want to do an Arial. We don't want to do a narrow. We just want to do either a black, or let's just do a regular Arial and make it bold. Or let's see what the black Arial looks like. Nah, that's a little too dark. Let's go back to just the regular Arial, and we'll make it bold. So we now have the railroad signage. Again, we've got to bring the sign down a little bit. So the biggest thing we've got to do now is figure out how to cut the sign. So the way to do this is actually really pretty simple. What you do is you make 2 boxes. And a box up here, this is the toolbar. Remember, we pulled that drop down. We got all those tools up there. The box is in my recently used shape. It's a rectangle right here. Choose a rectangle, and we choose that, and we come down here and we make a rectangle. Now, we don't want anything to print here. What we really want to do is we want to make cut lines. So the way we do that is we take the shape fill and we go no fill. You can do white, but no fill works fine. We want to make the shape black. You can do red here if you'd prefer. Why don't we do red, because it can make it easier to see what we're doing. Now, we want to make this 9 inches tall, right? So in O scale, we know that 9 inches tall, 1/4 of an inch is a foot. 9 inches tall is going to be 3/16 of an inch. So unfortunately, I can't do that math that well in my head. So what I do is I always pull up the calculator over here and go 3 divided by 16. So we need 0.1875 inches high. So remember how we do that is we click on this, use our right click mouse, we open the size and position, and we want to make the height 0.18, and it's not going to let us do 7.5, so let's just do 188. We'll round up a little bit for the material there. So now this is actually the width that we want to cut our sign, or the height we want to cut our sign to. Now what we want to do is just duplicate that, Control C, Control V. And now what we're worried about is the width of it. We know the width, 48 inches, again, an O scale reason for picking it. We know that's going to be 1 inch. So we go over here, click on this again. This tool right here is the sizing tool, and we make the width 1 inch. Now on this one, we want to actually make it taller like this. And now what we want to do is we want to put this over here. And we realize we probably want one more space in the railroad just to get it right out to the end. Did I put a space? Did I put a, oh, hang on. I think I did a carriage return instead of a space. There we go. Got it right now. Finally got it right. So now we just center everything. And so again, I'm going to pull this in a little bit closer so we can see this. And you notice we've got everything centered. Because we're going to use these for cut lines, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size and width of these lines. Now, there are two ways to do this. Generally, if you don't know what to do and you click on an object, right-click your mouse and you'll see something happen. And you notice we got a bunch of tools when we right-click. Down here, we got the size and position. But you notice up here, we got some tools to actually edit the line. The other thing you can do is you can go into the shape format tools and you can edit the line, edit the shape outline, which is the line, go to weight and drop that to a 0.5 point. So now it's really small. So now what we've got to do, we want to cut out the sign right on those lines. I think I need one more space here in road. What do you think? We put one more space in there and move it over and center it right like that. I just do it by eye because when you make this stuff so small, nobody's going to see a 1/4 inch difference. So now what you do is we've got to get rid of those red lines. So what we do is we pick the box again and we put a box, and I always start right about here and I go across to right about here. Now I'm going to move this out of the way because what I want to do is I want to click on this and I want to bring it to the front. Remember, that was a range, bring to front. So now I'm going to take this box and I'm going to move it back where I positioned it there to begin with. And now all I want to do with that box is do two things. I want to make the shape white and I want to make the outline white. And if you notice what I've got now, if you we kind of step back and look at it, is I've got a box where I can actually cut these lines across using these to line up my straight edge. So when I cut with a scalpel across, I'll get a nicely cut out box, exactly the right size, but it doesn't have black at the edges. Now, the reality is you can take these, excuse me, let me get rid of this. We don't need that any longer. We can bring these in tighter so that you can print them side by side. Quite frankly, the other way you can do this that I often do is I just do two lines. By the way, it went straight because I heard the shift key down when I made it. So you do a line like this, you make the shape outline red, and then you just go CV and put two of them and do them like that. And then you just set the distance apart between them to put that in, but it's the same concept. So now what we can do is take this, get it down to this size, just group it, and now we can make another one. The second one, all we want to do there, you can either do one of two things. You can either ungroup it, or if an object's grouped, you click on something in the group, and we can take this and change this words to say crossing. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that the words crossing really didn't fill in the whole thing there on the words. So one of the things we're going to want to do is we're going to want to spread those out a little bit. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to do two things to spread those out. The first thing is we're going to take those words and we're going to go up here on this. These are more of those text tools. And if you look right here, you see the thing that looks like centering? Those will center those. And then if you come down here to the bottom right of the text tools, you'll see this little signal here. and you notice it says character spacing. And you notice that you can actually add spacing to it. So we can make this expanded, and we can actually expand this out. And I'm going to go up a few points so you can see what happens. And you'll notice, well, I actually over expanded it. So now I got to go back and unexpand it. So I go up here, character spacing. Let me go down to about 3. Not quite enough. Just a little bit, always just a little bit of time and placement here. Yeah. I got over exuberant here. It happens to me all the time. There we go. So now I've got my 2 things to cut out for my sign. You know what I think we're going to do, just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and put the next one off to next week. So what I'm going to do next week is talk about the other object here that we had, which is the, let me get that other object up, this Missouri Pacific logo. And so what we'll do is next week, we'll focus on how to build that. And we'll just add another one on, because I think in terms of time, I think I've used enough time for tonight. So back to you, Jim.
Before we go, anybody have any questions so far on what Phil did tonight? Or comments?
Yeah, comments, did anybody learn anything?
Yes.
Nope. Somebody learns. I mean, the whole thing for me is hoping that somebody's learning some new tricks of how to do some stuff you haven't learned before. Has anybody actually tried this in the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yep.
Gone and played with it and tried it?
Yeah, Phil, I was actually just making signs for a hotel that I built today. I started out in PowerPoint, but I ended up doing it in Publisher because Publisher was giving me more exact sizing on some of my shapes.
Yeah, Ed, I
don't
just
know why.
used
When
it.
I would put it, the shape, when I put in my measurements for my shape in PowerPoint, they weren't printing out correctly. When I did it in Publisher, they were. So
Wow. Hadn't heard that before.
well, instead of trying to track down the reason why, I just did it in Publisher. It was easier.
Ed, I just did a sign in Microsoft Word. The difference that I do is I put in the box around the word box, or the text box, and I actually cut the lines off.
Yep,
And
that's
I
another
cut
way
the
of doing it.
sign. That's
Yep.
that's an alternate. You put on the outside, top and bottom,
Yep.
and the 2 sides, which is even better because you won't even have to cut off
Right.
a line. But that's what I've been doing. That's what I learned this evening, is put those boxes on the
Little boxes, a couple of
above and
lines there.
beyond,
Yep.
below.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody who's been in printing, we know of those as crop marks, and you live and die by crop marks.
Exactly. Well, you see them commercially, and it's just, that's how you throw them in, and it's easy. It's really easy to do, and have white. If you've got a sign that's gonna have a black border, and we'll talk about it, you cut the border out and leave it on the sign, and then you blacken the edges, and we'll show you how that looks really good. But that's for black. For white, generally the side of the sign is white enough that you don't need to do much.
Greg, what's the cost of a Publisher program?
It's pretty much free if you buy a PC. Now, in order to keep it going and keep it up to date, you often have to get Microsoft Office Suite, which now they go to a subscription, which can cost you sometimes $100 a year, but you don't have to always keep up to date. It's very easy to get a Publisher and PowerPoint and Word. All of those come wrapped in the Office Suite, and you don't have to keep it up to date.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Well, we'll leave it back to you. Bye.
And Phil, next time, then you'll do the other sign, right?
Yes, exactly. Because it just takes long enough. There's probably too much to do in one session.
Okay, thank you. Well, now let's turn to Bob Davidson and his workshop, Tools, Tips. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Let's get right into it. And I trust everybody can see that.
Yes, sir.
So welcome to Workshop Tips and Tricks. One thing, just going back to Phil's thing, I'm on a Mac platform, and a lot of what Phil is doing is compatible in Keynote, which is the Mac version. And that whole idea with putting in the no fill, no, pardon the pun, no fill, no stroke boxes, that's great. I never thought of doing that in 30 years. So thank you, Phil. Anyway, what we're doing here is sharing some tips and tricks from my career in the theater and exhibits as a carpenter and a designer. So tonight's main topic is getting it together. We're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of everything, literally. First, we'll look at some screws. You've probably seen a lot of these. Just standard straight taper Phillips heads and slotted screws, drywall screws. I right now tend to use square drive. There are many different drives you can see here on the bottom, star drives and Torx drives. And I've now switched over pretty much only to using square drive screws. They don't spin out on you. And I just have had a lot of luck with it. But these are just some of the many different types of screws that are out there. Screw sizes typically are done by numbers. So number 1 is a real tiny screw. Number 2s we use you might use a lot in small case work and things like that. Your drywall screws typically are either number 6 or number 8, and then you get into larger screws, 10s and 12s. Typically, you're not going to find larger than a number 12 screw in most hardware stores. But this is just a good chart. If you go back and watch this later, it's a good chart just so you know how big some of these screws are. Bolts, lots of different types of bolts. Self-drilling, you can tell by the little drill tip on them. Hex head bolts, carriage bolts, which we use, building decks and things like that. Lag bolts, which is kind of just giant screws. Socket screws, which come a couple different ways, with a taper top, also with a round top. We call them socket drive screws, set screws, obviously eye bolts and stuff. One thing that you may not see a lot in your hardware store, which is really really useful bolt, is called elevator bolts. And those are literally used in elevators. When they build the framework of elevators, they can't have any bolt heads sticking out when they do the interior finishes in the elevator cab. So elevator bolts have a really large but very flat head on them. So you can stick up a panel and it won't encumber the space where you want the panel to fit against the structure of the cab. So we use these quite a bit. Lots of nuts, soup to nuts. So hex nuts, nylocks are very good if you want things not to loosen up on you. So, excuse me, it's just a hex nut with a nylon insert. Jam nuts or half height nuts. You'll see these on drill presses. If you want to do a depth adjustment, you'll have 2 jam nuts and you literally jam them together to lock it in. Wing nuts you'll find, cap nuts, acorns. So again, this is just all kind of just a chart that you might find useful for finding different ways to hold things together. Some things that you may not see everywhere, but I use these quite a bit. A shoulder wing nut is a great wing nut to use if you're holding down. I use these to hold down my my cutter and my sander. I have studs, and then because they're easy to get them off of the counter. And wing bolts are out there as well. So these are all good alternatives. Sizes of bolts I've listed, given you a chart here with both metric and imperial. So M6 is basically a 1/4 inch bolt. This goes by millimeters, so 6 millimeters and up, 1/4 inch and up. You'll see in both there's coarse and fine threads, so the pitch or threads per inch. So a 1/4 20 is how you'll see them listed at the hardware store. That's a coarse thread bolt. That's your typical bolt. Fine thread is if you're in a stress situation, if you want to have a little bit better gripping power, use a fine thread bolt. So again, just interesting data to have. Some specialty bolts that you may not know about, draw bolts. These are used by cabinet or counter installers a lot, but guess what? They're really great if you want to hold modules together. Basically, you just drill out a hole, or you can cut slots and you use these. You can see this one is made to work with a European hole drill, and then you route out or cut out a slot. Here's one that's more straight. So draw bolts are a good item to have for certain joining projects. I showed T-nuts before. There actually are YouTube videos on the proper way to install T-nuts. We typically countersink them, so we'll take a bore, and so that we're countersinking the plate. And then you see the way that they bend up the tabs that you actually hammer into the wood to hold the T-nut in place. We actually usually put small screws into these recesses to keep the T-nut from falling out. One of the things when you buy a T-nut, you'll see different lengths of the cylinder here. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right length that you want, that because some of these come pretty long. You don't want it obviously sticking through the substrate. Zippets are just a plastic fastener that we use a lot of, typically used for drywall, but they're also good in foam. If you're using a dense foam, a high density foam, zippets are great to hold things in place. So just something to know about that. And you buy these, they're pretty inexpensive. They typically, you can either get them, they'll be packaged with regular pan head sheet metal screws. I tend to just use drywall screws with them because it's a little bit less of a bite and they won't spin out on you. Threaded inserts and rib nuts. So these are what I actually put the studs into in my workbenches. There's a couple different styles. There's a hex drive threaded insert. This is a brass that you put in with it. There's actually a tool, but you can just use a slotted screwdriver. So basically you drill a clearance hole and then you screw this down into it. And it's a great way to affix something flush to any flat surface. Riv nuts we use for tubing, for steel or aluminum tubing. There's a special tool and basically it's a rivet. It sucks this up and it expands into place, but then you can use it to attach a bolt to a piece of steel or aluminum tube. Snap toggles. I love snap toggles. Basically, these are toggles that don't fall out don't fall into the wall when you take the bolt out of them. These come as small as 1/8 inch I've seen. I typically use 3/16, and they're not just for drywall. You can use these with any plywood to hold things down. Basically, you drill in a 3/16, you drill a 1/2 inch clearance hole. This slides into the hole. You flatten it out, slide this collar down tight against the substrate, and then these tabs snap off. And basically it's a poor man's threaded insert. Really useful. And they typically are packaged with the bolt, so that's good too. Hanger bolts, these are great. If you've got stud walls and you want to put your layout or your framework into it. You'll see these on furniture, on chairs to hold the legs in place. So there's a wood thread and then there's a machine thread. So you can screw them in. Basically, you just put a couple nuts on here, jam nuts, screw it into a hole, and then you now have a stud sticking out of your wooden stud or any other or board, and you can attach and detach. So these are called hanger bolts. You want to try to find those. Blind rivets or pop rivets, those are great to use, typically just for sheet metal. You can use them with some thicker plastic material, what I recommend if you do that, they actually sell washers that are sized to pop rivets. So you want to put a washer on the bottom, which will prevent it from pulling through the plastic. Okay. Related info, the whole story. Anytime you put a wood screw in, unless you're working out with out on the deck with pressure treated wood, you want to drill a pilot hole. If you don't, you're gonna split the wood out. Mark my word, you'll think you're not, but you're gonna. The other thing a pilot hole typically will make you do is it makes you measure things out. So you decide exactly where you want to put the screws. Lots of different types of drill bits, twist bits, auger bits, brad point bits. We're going to get into that in a little bit. There's a couple different masonry bits, spade bits here, or we call them speed bores. Step bits are a great thing to have in your toolbox for drilling either at plastics, Sintra, styrene even, you can use them, and then countersinking bits here. Brad point drill bits, I swear by these. If you want to drill a decent hole in wood, you want to use a brad point bit. They're easy to center. And then the way that they're cut, the way the end is cut, they grab, you don't get a lot of tear out, you'll get a nice clean hole. So make the investment in a set of brad point bits. Forstner bits. They're not cheap, but if you've had the breakout that you get when you try using a spade bit or a speed bore on a piece of plywood, you won't get it with Forstner bits. The other thing that Forstner bits allow you to do is not drill a penetrating hole. So you can just drill a recessed hole into, I actually use Forstner bits to drill into sign foam when I was doing recesses for some jars. Actually, I used a piece of sign foam to hold all my paints in a drawer. So you want to explore Forstner bits. Hole saws obviously are very usable. You can pick up a cheap kit, or when your kid asks you to put a new doorknob on a door at his house, you're going to buy one anyway. That's how I got mine. Acrylic specific drill bits. How many times have you tried drilling a piece of plexiglass and you almost get through and then the drill bit grabs and the next thing you know, you've cracked the piece of plexi? That's why they make acrylic points. So these have a real steep entry point and they cut like butter. You will not crack the plexiglass if you use acrylic point drills. So I recommend those. Couple tools that you want to have: get an automatic center punch. You can use this in wood, use it on styrene, use it on metal. This is the one from Harbor Freight for $4. Basically, this is a spring loaded. So all you do is you position it on your crosshairs and push down and it'll snap and it'll give you a point to, for your drill bit to find. The other thing you want to have, and we talked about this back in week 3, is a drill block. It helps you drill it perpendicular to the surface and it'll help you align it. And again, all these marks that are on the sides help you find the center of the hole that you want to drill. So cool chart. I've just found this up on the web. You'll note, a lot of times people reference numbers for drill bits. So this shows all the numbers, starting with the number 80 bit down to a number 1 bit. There are letter designations for bits, A through Z. And then there's metric sizes as well as decimal sizes of bits. So this is just a real good cross-reference. I'll try to, when I get done here, I'll try to find the site and then I will put this up in the chat area. Make the investment. I did, it costs $100 or whatever, but I bought a full drill index and basically I've got everything that I need. Again, mine is just like this. It goes down to a number 60. Less than that, I'm buying them from Micromark. So tool of the week this week is a frother. $7. It's basically a little paint mixer. What you don't want to do with this is pull it in and out of the paint though, because then it's going to aerate it. But especially if you have something that's been sitting on a shelf for a while, this is a great way to break it up, and then you could just rinse it off. And frankly, if you burn it out, it's $7. So I've actually been using this now. I've been experimenting with different ways to do concrete. And I'm actually, I'll show you, I found this thing called Rockite, which is, it's a concrete made just for fasteners, and it's incredibly fine. And it's so far it's working out. So I'll have more on that in the future. But anyway, the milk frother, I just found it. It's a lot of fun, and I've been using it lately. So tonight's neat website, McMaster.com. McMaster Car is a godsend. They have everything. They have warehouses all across the country. You get stuff typically in one day, or two at most. And just to give you an idea, we'll look at screws and bolts. And if we want to look at carriage bolts, and we want to look at medium strength, grade 5, they have everything. There's no minimum orders, and you don't need to open an account with them. It's just a great resource if you need anything that has to do with, they have electrical stuff, they have all kinds of stuff. It's just a giant warehouse of hardware. So McMaster, and it's actually just McMaster.com. All right. So next week, we're going to look at making the cut. We had a little bit from Martin last week, I think it was, on cutting. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about blades, both saw blades and knife blades, and the architecture around them and how that affects the cutting that we do. And we'll look at choppers, and then we're going to talk about chatter again, because chatter is a very critical thing when we're cutting up wood. So that's it for me tonight. Any questions or comments, or let me know if I did something wrong?
Well, I'll tell you,
Lots of neat stuff, Bob. Thanks.
Thank you.
yeah, the one thing you didn't mention about those Robinson square drives, it's a wedge fit. When you put the screw on the end of that, I'll use the number 2s. When you put
Yes,
it on
that's
there,
right.
it stays there,
Yeah,
and you can put it into some with one hand, put it into some inaccessible spot, pull the trigger, and bam, it's in there.
exactly. Yeah, I just love them. So, but that's just me. And we'll talk about them a little. When I switched over to them was actually when I started doing pocket hole joinery with Craig tools, because all the Craig stuff is the square drive. And that's when I fell in love with them. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bob, I think you did a great job. I learned a lot, at least. I never heard of some of that stuff.
Well, thank you.
Phil, I don't know whether you got my email with the photo in it.
I'll look.
I guess not. Anyway, Mark Poggendorf was supposed to be here this evening, and he's not going to be able to make it. He sent me a text, and listen to this. I've never seen this much water in the LA area. There's no TV, no internet at the hotel. Flights are all delayed. Potholes are causing flat tires on the freeways. It's a total mess. That's Los Angeles. So Mark, unfortunately, will not be with us tonight. Before I turn to Tom Farrell for his presentation, though, I want to introduce Kevin Hunter, who is the owner of Touch Toggle. Kevin, did you make it?
Hey, Jim, did you want to show that photo of the photo you emailed me? Real quick? Hang on, let me do this real quick and then
Sure,
we'll
go
come
ahead.
back. Hang on just a second. I just got to get all my controls here worked out. Okay, here we go.
Bob says that he has a career in design and carpentry and so forth. Thanks to Bob Davidson, we have the signage that we can take around to all of the shows. Bob designed it. He got 3 of them made for us. They're in self-contained canisters, I guess you'd call them. And we've been showing them all over the country at different train shows. And Bob, I can't thank you enough for the creativity you showed putting that together for us. And it sure has helped a lot of people find out about our scholarship.
It was our pleasure, Jim.
Now, Kevin, I'm sorry, were you here? Kevin Hunter?
I am here. I had to find the mute button to
I got you.
get back on.
Let me answer. Kevin is going to be doing a MyBuild, a build along coming up in April. But I asked him to be on the show tonight and talk a little bit about it. And he wants to tell you about a great discount for the people on the show. So Kevin, welcome.
Hi. Do you have video or not?
No, do not have video.
Okay, let's try that. Okay. Hi. There we
There.
are.
Now
Okay. Well, I just was able to get in this evening and had some time to get online. I have been, at this time of year, it's very difficult for me to break free. So, I'm glad to see you guys. And yeah, I like the presentation just now on fasteners and all the tools and whatnot. That's great. Anyway, we have a bunch of new products. We have some interesting new ways to make things go together. Most people are using our touch toggles to control their switches manually, controlling their switch motors manually. And we have solutions for most types of switch motors at this point. They all use exactly the same touch toggle controls. And so, what is it, April 17th or something like that?
Yes.
Whatever that Wednesday is, I'll be here. We're doing a 3-part thing, and I'll be introducing, I think for each section, I'll be introducing some products and then talk about how to use them, how to assemble them, and some of the little tricks that make putting together a control panel very easy. I'll try and have demonstrations and so forth. We have a couple of new products, which you can see on the website. The easiest way to get to the website is touchtoggle.com. And it's also Barrett Hill Shop, which is, Barrett Hill is my shop company, but Touch Toggle is just easier for people to remember. Anyway, what I'll recommend for a build along, if you want to design your own control panel for your own railroad, or if you're thinking of doing that, go online and get a package of toggles and a base and a power supply. And you choose the base based on which type of switch machine you're operating. Most of it's self-explanatory. If you have trouble, there's a contact us, including a telephone number and an email address at the top of the page. So just let me know if you're having trouble finding what you're looking for. We have separate bases for the old twin coil machines like Atlas and Bachmann and some of the older machines. We have one for Cato machines, the push-pull. It's also what you use for Rapido trains, switch machines, and uncouplers. And then we have what we call the direct base, which operates tortoise machines and stall motors. There are a number of other machines like I always get it wrong, but the little Eastern European machine that
Pico
brought into California right now, the MP3, is that, or MP1, something like that. And so we've got solutions for different machines. Most of them are on the site. We also have servo controls. So if you want to drive a little servo motor, We have direct controls for that are fully adjustable. And actually, we're right in transition. In a month or so, we'll have our new servo based controller, which will have a bunch of optional features. So if you're thinking of servos, you may want to wait for that. Anyway, and we also, the toggles can be used with your own electronics. A lot of people hook them to Arduino boards and so forth. And it's keeping everything straight. But so there are a bunch of other manufacturers that our gear can hook to. The new Digitrax 7 series of controllers, we have a unit that plugs directly into that. So there's no interpretation at all. It just works. So that's really thrilling for me. Anyway, what I'll recommend, go online, find the package that works for you, get a small something to put together. If you're good with graphics and want to do something based on your own railroad, you can do that in a computer. But we have a little video on the website that shows how I did it with a Sharpie. So you don't have to get exotic with it. But and the thing is, the parts are all reusable. So if you do something that's kind of half-baked, done with a pencil, you can always update it with what you like. And often it's better to do a couple of iterations so that you like it. You put it together and you go, well, that's terrible. So, and then you can fix it very quickly. So what you'll need to do is get a picture frame suitable for the size you're thinking of doing, one of our packages, and at a Michael's or a fabric store, there's a material, polyester batting, and this stuff is very fluffy. You'll want a small amount of that. I'll make it more obvious when we actually build it. But those are the only parts you'll need to process through this, to go through this. I'll be back next week. I'll try and have some answers to questions people send me, and just bring things more up to date.
Kevin, you're giving a nice discount on these scores, right?
Yeah, and so when you check out at the site, there is a little thing right next to the subtitle that says, "Do you have a coupon?" And now you do. The coupon is NewTracks23, terribly difficult to remember, and that will go from now till about a week after the end of our my presentation. So I don't know the exact date, but it's late April. And anyway, so you can type that in now and get a 10% discount on anything you do purchase. So it's part of the reason I wanted to come in tonight, was just to share that and let people get lined up. And so
Kevin, we look forward to seeing you next week. I can't thank you enough for coming by and stopping in tonight. Thank you.
Right. So, oh yeah, and yeah, somebody on the note here just said we offer terminal connectors for tortoises, and I actually cooked up the first socket PC board and terminal type assembly that now is available from 4 or 5 different manufacturers, and so we tried to keep pace with the current pricing, but I actually had those for sale before I had touch toggles. So, I got so tired of soldering upside down under the layout. Well, thanks, Jim, and I'll turn it back to you. We've got.
Okay.
I'll have plenty more to say soon.
Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I told Jim earlier I can't be on this every week because I fall asleep shortly after 8 o'clock. Whether I'm sitting up or not, I'm usually out of it. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, Kevin, my presentation coming up is on touch toggles, so
Oh, yeah.
stay awake for that one. We
Are you
spoke,
up next? Are you up next, or do I have to go to sleep?
we spoke right before, if you recall.
Yes.
Yeah, here I am.
Yeah. And I like, what, is that a projection behind you or a green screen or?
It's just a picture of my layout.
Yeah, it looked like. All right. Well, good to see some faces that I talked to a year ago or more. God, when was the last, was it 2 years or more?
No, no, it wasn't that long. Come on. What, you got a worse memory than I did, Kevin.
I am just now, because it's the middle of production and I am making stuff like crazy. And for some reason, it's just been an explosion of new products. So again, I'll give you details on all this stuff, but I sent out for 6 new prototype boards today.
Okay.
So that's, each one leads to a product or it's a failure, you know, one way or the other. But a lot of neat stuff coming. So
Kevin,
looking forward to it.
we need more manufacturers in the hobby that have your thought process and your guts to bring these products to market. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Well, now let's turn to Tom Farrell, who's Scratchbuilding his total layout, which is getting beautiful so far. And Tom, I will turn it over to you to hear what you're doing with Kevin's product.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I just want to say what a great product it is. I didn't realize Kevin was going to be on this evening, so this seems like a conspiracy. But I worked on this all day. Well, not all day, but all afternoon trying to install a couple of his products. Let me just jump right in here. I'll share the screen and hold on a moment. Is that all working for everybody?
Yes, sir.
Everybody can hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, this is a photograph of my previous rustic buff and old Gothic. This is the Main Street Olytic. Probably my favorite photograph. I always start these things off with a photograph of my previous layout, which was 15 years in the making and one day in taking it out. But the new rustic buff and old Gothic ON 30 Railroad will even be better. I'm building this layout without any compromises. So as most of you know already, for example, I switched to DCC and the old layout was analog. And I'm using tortoise switch machines. And since I'm basically no compromises, I was trying to figure out just the best way to control those tortoise machines. And I had seen the Barrett Hill ads for several years and looked at their website, and it looked very interesting, this capacitive discharge switch. It's a touch switch. So the first area that I'm going to use his product is this town of Redrum. It's not sure if I'm going to keep that name or not. It's sort of a joke, but I'm going to put him, the ones I did this afternoon are in that red circle. I did this crossing basically. And first thing I did is cut a little piece of masonite. His mini cup touch toggles are standalone capacitive discharge switches. You simply have to drill a 1-inch hole and then glue them with like a acrylic adhesive, or you don't need much to hold them in place. The other type of switch he has is the type that go behind a piece of glass for a control panel. So I'll do that. Well, that could be a couple weeks away for me, but I plan on doing the balance. Everything to the right will be on a control panel. The that crossover that's highlighted with the red circle, those will be just individual mini cup touch toggles. Same with the mining area right above the number 2 there, that little turnout, that'll just be an individual switch, an individual mini cup touch toggle, and everything to the right will be on a control panel using his other style of switch called a touch toggle. Mounts behind a piece of glass, which is kind of intriguing. So this is that panel installed. If everybody recalls how I have my fascia above, and then I left this gap specifically to add things like touch toggles and universal panels from Digitrax. And I will put a blank out panel to cover up that electronic, the direct base, he calls it. So let me just run through conceptually how this works. This direct base is available in several outputs. That's the terminology. The outputs go, in my case, to Tortoise switch machines. And you can buy, I don't have it memorized, but I purchased a 4 output and an 8 output. I believe there's a 2 output. Basically, the output means the number of Tortoise machines you can control with his touch toggle. So this is an interface, basically. I'll have a close-up of this a little later here, but it'll all make sense. But basically, everything gets hooked up to here: the power, the touch toggles, and the Tortoise machines. So this is and I guess that's why he calls it the direct base. Everything gets hooked up to here. Now I'll explain what those plugins are to the right in a moment. I went ahead and I sprung for his terminal adapters that he was just talking about. These plug directly into the bottom of a Tortoise machine. There's 2 versions, basically, one for the older Tortoise machines and one for the newer Tortoise machines. I have the newer Tortoise machines. You can solder the wires directly to the Tortoise machine, but I like the idea of the ability to unplug this from the Tortoise machine in case I need to do a repair. It's not a science project. I did make one error today. If you look above there, that yellow and green wire, that's my 12-volt bus. I bought the adapter to plug in my own 12-volt voltage to this direct base. Kevin does offer his own power supply that plugs in place of this adapter plug. But since I have a 12-volt bus running throughout my layout on its own transformer, I didn't elect to have his independent power supply, because I will have direct bases all over the layout, and I don't want to plug in that, I knew in advance I didn't want to plug in 6 or 8 power supplies all over my 35-foot long layout. So I ran that bus above. And that bus is monitored by a 12-volt power supply. He does clearly mark on the direct base and on that adapter a plus or minus, which I noticed afterwards when I wired it backwards. Luckily, my 12-volt meter, these are those meters, if you recall, that I have on my control panel, it was blinking, telling me that I had a problem somewhere and I wasn't getting any voltage. I immediately figured out that I had that reversed. So you do have to pay attention to the plus or minus. Kevin's probably cringing at the moment.
It is the only way you can let the smoke out, is to connect the power backwards.
So if you look at the close-up here of his direct base, you'll see the adapter plug in the upper right. He has it clearly marked plus or minus. My advice is to pay attention to that. And the input splitter, my application is a crossing. And so I want one switch to control 2 turnouts. But as it turns out with tortoise machines, you don't necessarily need the splitter. I learned that talking directly to Kevin before the show. But so I just wired my 2 turnouts to those blue terminals on the left. That's where your tortoise machines get hooked up. And this is the temporary wiring, just to see if everything works. I'll neaten this up with wire ties and things, but what you're seeing here is I don't really need that adapter to the right, but I have it screwed in there, so I'm leaving it in place for now. But you can see I have 2 wires in each of the terminals off to the left. Those all go to the 2 tortoise machines. I'm sure that all makes sense. Yeah. And the ribbon wire, that's what goes to the capacitive discharge switch, the mini cup touch toggle. Here's above the layout. There's to the left is the switching gear. And to the right there is my pop in and pop out tortoise machine, which I described a couple weeks ago how I do those installations. This is the last slide of the program, but that's the basic installation. So you can see there's the 2 Pico turnouts. They're super glued to a piece of plywood. And then the tortoise machines are screwed to the base of the plywood. And then using Barrett Hill's terminal adapters, I've plugged them into the bottom of the tortoise machines. Then those 12-volt power wires go to the blue terminals on the direct base. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, see the mini cup touch toggles lights up green or red. A single LED does 2 colors. I will, of course, paint that white. It's not glued or anything in there. And I'll put a blank out panel there that's removable for maintenance purposes, but that'll all look spacecraft-like when I'm done. And 2 things on the whole thing. I just want to say how the quality of materials and the engineering of it, it's virtually foolproof. It goes together very rapidly. I bought they're called 3-pin extension cables because I bought a whole bunch of them. These extension cables go from the mini cup touch toggle or the touch toggles to the base, just because what comes with the switches, the capacitance switches, is a very short wire. So my recommendation is understand where your base is going to go in relationship to your touch toggle and order the appropriate extension cables. Very well engineered product. It worked perfectly right out of the box, exception I had the 2 polarity reversed on the power. Of course, that's not an issue if you buy his power supply. As I said, I'm not going to have a control panel here because there's only 2 turnouts. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the other turnout that will have its own standalone mini cup touch toggle. And then everything to the right, which I believe there's at least 8 turnouts, they will be on a control panel. And I'll use his 2 light red-green touch toggles. I'll create some artwork. I'll put it in the back of a piece of glass, and then I'll glue his touch toggles in place and hopefully make a control panel worthy of a spacecraft, something really attractive, Any questions, guys?
I think your layout there looks really great, the way you have made it so that you can access the tortoises from above and do all this wiring without having to crawl underneath it.
Yeah, that to be honest, I lifted that whole piece of pink foam right out of there while I did most of the wiring here. And then I dropped the pink foam in, and then I plugged in my tortoise machines. So
Your back thanks you.
yeah, I did 99% of the wiring without the foam in place. So it just made made it a lot easier, you know.
I think you've done a beautiful job, Tom. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin Hunter. This is a great product.
Oh, thanks for the the advertising.
Well, if it didn't work, you'd hear that too.
As I say, I like to sleep at night.
I got one question for you, Tom.
Yeah.
Tell me about the name of your model railroad.
Oh, yeah. Well, the rustic buff and old Gothic is named for the two poorest grades of dimensional cut limestone. I was fortunate to be the CEO and president of the Indiana Limestone Company. It's the largest dimensional stone company in the world. We did icons like the Empire State Building, the Pentagon, 32 of the 50 state capitals, most universities east of the Mississippi, all those buildings you see in DC. So my little joke was to pick two pieces, you know, we had have all these names for the stone. It's like the Eskimos have 50 names for snow. Well, we must have 50 names for all the different types of limestone. And the two poorest, nearly garbage, is rustic buff and old Gothic. It's nearly what we call overburden, nearly scrap. So that's my little private joke.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Okay.
Thanks
Thanks for having me again. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing both of you next week.
All right.
Well, now it's time for the MyBuild part of our shows. Pat, if we could play the video for Dan Darty's companies, who own the magazines that I write for, whose philosophy is to bring modeling back into model railroading.
Welcome to the world of scale, O&S railroading. We are your resource for all O&S scale modeling. Both our magazines are advertiser supported and free to read online, download as a PDF, or even print. All advertisers are hot linked to their website, so if you see something you like, just click. Please check out our websites for the current issues. All back issues available free for the O-Scale Resource and the S-Scale Resource magazines. And, if you are a manufacturer, distributor, or retail establishment, please contact us through our website for advertising opportunities.
And I appreciate Dan sponsoring this part of our shows for us. And now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Course, who is the host for this part of our shows. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
And by the way, congratulations on being a NMRA partner now and giving any NMRA member a discount on your company's products.
Yep, thank you. All right, we'll get started here. We've only got 3 tonight. Martin's up first. MyBuild, of course, featuring you and what you have to bring to the table. Next month, we're going to call it a challenge now. The MyBuild challenge will be the vegetation, scenery, that sort of thing. So show us your fauna, etc. I think fauna is the right word. All right, Martin, are you up?
Well, I'm upright.
Okay. Well, that's always a good start. All right, looks like you've got 8 slides tonight.
Well, however many there is. Oh gosh. Now I don't know which one's which.
Thought they were all the same.
No, there's two different gondolas.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully you have them together.
Yeah, they're in order the way you gave them to me. So
Okay. Yeah, I think this is the I can't tell. Well, I'm going to guess. I think this is the All Nation kit gondola, which if I'm wrong, we'll reverse that in a few seconds. But it's an All Nation kit that I picked up for a whopping $1 at the Strasbourg meet about a year ago, in a box. In the original box, it had a little note on the end saying "not complete." And I thought, for $1, what can possibly go wrong? I mean, even if it's not complete, even the parts are worth saving that were in the box. And as it turned out, it actually was complete, except for the stirrup steps. Everything was there. So, well, okay, I added most of the underbody details, but the rest of the kit is pretty much as it comes out of the box. After 40, 50 years later, it's, so these a whole $1 kit sometimes is, it sounds like a terribly painful investment, but it can lead to a little bit of fun. So the decals are from K4 and can of paint, and off you go, and there's a nice car. Let's go to the next slide, whatever it is. Yep. Okay. So that is the All Nation one. So since I don't like empty gondolas because I think they're just painfully boring to look at, I built this rack out of some styrene shapes and just welded it all together with some methylene chloride, which is what Tenax used to be before they banned methylene chloride. Old chemists never go away. They just keep using solvents that you can't get. And they build things like this, and it's removable in a little piece of, I don't know what the other material is. It's not styrene, it's poly ABS that I painted aluminum. So that's one gondola. There should be another one then.
Yep.
Nope, that's the back side of the first one. The second one's below. That's a different gondola.
Yep.
That's the Walthers kit. It's a different car. So I built basically the same two cars. They're very similar cars, but not quite the same. But the Walthers kit, that was a whopping $15 investment in a kit. So and a load that was made out of leftover plumbing parts, very hastily thrown together and covered with a tarp and thrown in the middle of the car. So, for like I said, a whopping investment of $16 in kits. And the decals came off the same sheet, so I didn't have to buy two sets of decals. It's one set of decals. So you can find pretty good bargains at train shows if you get out of the basement and go out and do things, which I hope to do next month because there's 2 O-scale meets within 3 weeks. So I'll probably come home with a lot of stuff that I don't really need or want, but can't resist because $1 kits are hard to walk away from. And there should be another slide or two.
Yes. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what that load was because to me it kind of looks like the jet engine out of a Harrier or something, but it's not.
Oh, there you go. There's more slides of it. So yeah, it's whatever you think it is. It is open to whatever your mind might convince yourself that you're really seeing. Don't work too hard on that, though. Thinking is not good for the soul. But, it's also a good way to get rid of some excess plumbing bits out of the plumbing drawer in the shop, too. So, I'm always looking for a way like how to get rid of something that I don't need.
Yeah.
So the best way I can think of is to make use of it and use it by attrition and make it go away. And there should be another slide or two.
Yep.
Nope, there's the underbody for people who are all excited about AB brake systems. Yeah, this is one of the two of the unusual cases where I actually used AB brake systems. So I wish I'd made notes and taken lots and lots of pictures of this because I'm going to have to go through this all in detail in about 3 months. So I'll do it again because I've got a Railcraft gondola, tin plated steel and brass, so I can solder it together so I can watch. You can watch me burn my fingers, or at least hear me complain about it later. What's interesting is also it's a Walters car, but I put All Nation trucks under it. Oh well, they were a good buy at the same train show. And there should be another slide.
Yep, I think there's this one, and then there's one more after this.
Yeah, well, this is the little store I've been putting together. I'm just about got the interior worked out. There's a few more odds and ends and things and bits and bobs to go into it, and odds and ends and so on and so forth. Maybe next month I can show you the end of it, because I might actually put it on a piece of plywood and put a little bit of scenery around it, just so I can qualify for April. So
there you go.
So there's a lot of those cans and stuff are castings, but a fair number of them are just pieces of brass tubing that I soldered the ends over and just painted. So I have this ridiculous, about half a shoebox of brass tubing that I picked up from the Harry Roberts auction, the state auction, about 25, 30 years ago. And I'm still using it. And I'm still nowhere near more than halfway through it. So there's a huge amount of brass tubing and rod. And then maybe one more or not.
Yep.
Yeah, the back room. And you got to have a shop in the back room so you can build your model trains in it, or whatever it is you're working on back there. So it's coming along. It's not quite finished. There will be more things in it. There's a stock room with shelving unit behind it, all kinds of crates and what have you on it. But there's a little tool workspace there, and I don't think you can't see it. It's down at the bottom. There's a pair of filing cabinets, but next to the filing cabinets, there's the store safe. We got to keep some valuables in there. Probably the brass trains are in there. But other than that, that's coming along slowly. It's getting there. Should be done next month. Ready for presentation here, at least.
Very nice as usual, Martin. Are there any questions for Martin? Comments?
What's the combination to the safe? I'm sure it's working on one of your kits.
No, you'll have to ask Berkshire Valley. That's one of their castings, I think. I'm not sure whose it was now that you asked me, but I'm pretty sure it's Berkshire Valley. A lot of Berkshire Valley castings in this, but there's also a lot of stuff from a host of others, as well as a lot of my own castings. Some Scale City Designs parts in there too. Are there any other questions? Nope. Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. And now we will move on to Greg.
Okay,
Ready, Greg?
I'm unmuted.
Right. It looks like you've got 6 slides tonight.
This was a kit that I was building for one of my clients. He had picked it up last year at Timonium, and it's the first Nick and Nora design kit that I've built. They're actually run by Mike and Karen Baker, but they do a lot of nice kits and a lot of detail parts. And this particular one, the client wanted it because of that sign on the side. Well, I mentioned to him, you see that big front window? We're going to want to put an interior in that. And he goes, okay, whatever you want to do. So I had gotten some interior parts from Pete's Modeling, from Mini Prints, and some lighting stuff from Evans Design. Next slide. And this was the interior that I ended up coming up with. I'm not a restaurant designer, so there's probably some stuff in here that a real restaurateur would look at and say, well, you can't do that. But I have a door going into the back room, and I have a little counter here. Now, his layout is set in the 1940s, so he wanted a 1940s style luncheonette. So I got as many pictures as I could of what they looked like inside and tried to mimic it as well as I could. So a lot of the signage and stuff I took directly from photos from the 1940s. So you have your cheese sandwiches for 10 cents and your pork chops for 15 cents. Next slide. And then this is the outside of it. He said it's in a kind of rundown portion of town. So I made it look a little weathered and not quite kept up. Since it was going to have lighting inside it, I made the roof over the main part removable, and that vent there is actually a handle. You can just pick the whole roof up by grabbing that. Next slide. And then this is looking at from the front. One of the things I've found, if I'm going to light the interior of a building, but I want to have curtains in it, I'll print the curtains on tissue paper. You know, once I find a pattern I like, I'll make the design on the computer, and instead of just printing it on regular paper, I'll print it on tissue paper, and that's how you get the light shining through it as if it was fabric. I don't go to that trouble if I'm not putting lights inside it, but it does help if you are lighting the inside. Next one. And this is looking inside with the lights off from the outside. When trying to think of a couple things to put on the tables, the building was going to be closed at the time. And I found that if I took a small styrene strip that was maybe about 1/16 by 1/8 and painted it silver and then cut it into pieces, it looked like napkin holders. And I thought, no, that's not bad. Next slide. And then this is looking in during the daytime, shining the light inside it. Now, where it's going to be on his layout, he'll be able to light it up sometimes. And I have the guy in the back. The kit came with a lot of nice little extra details. All of the interior parts I added, but the kit came with a sheet that you could cut out into little cardboard boxes. So I thought, oh, that's great. I'll put a cardboard box because, you know, he's getting ready to open up for the day. And he's taking ketchup bottles out of the cardboard box. The ketchup bottles themselves were bottles that came from mini prints that I just painted red. So that's pretty much it. They'll be open for business probably around 11 o'clock tomorrow.
Very nice. Great job as usual, Greg.
It was a fun one. It took me about 3 weeks over first part of January, right after Christmas. And I'll get it to him next time we can meet up. He lives in West Virginia, and usually we can swap items at Timonium, but he's not going to be able to make the next one. So we'll have to figure something else out.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any questions for Greg? All righty. Well, thanks, Greg. Nice job as usual. And
thank you, Chris.
All righty. Next up, we have Father Ron. You up, Father Ron?
Yep, I'm here.
All righty. So it looks like you have one slide.
Yes, I decided to try to build the Palace Theater across the street from the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas. And what you see is the theater on the right there. And my model of it, the facade only, is on the left. The Palace Theater is immediately south of the Woolworth building there, and what was now, I think it's Ripley's Believe It or Not, is what's in the Woolworth building. And the present Palace Theater building houses, I think, a clothing store, a used clothing store, and the Guinness Book of World Records display. But this one is probably may be used on the Samra layout, may not be. It's kind of a scratch and bash. The top two floors are, I started out with the builders and not Design Preservation's Victorian windows, and I had to redo the inside of it in order to get it to come close to the pattern on the Palace building. The set of windows above the entries, that's all scratch built. I used N-Scale Architects bricks and cut out 3 rows and put 20 thousandths strip in there to represent the blocks that are on the building. And it's as close to imitating it as I could get. The building, the store entrance on the right is Small Towns by, I think that's a Rick's product, or what do you call it? I forget, not Rick's, but I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's that company that sells small town stuff. And then I did a scratch build of the actually theater entrance, and I couldn't you won't see it if it gets displayed on the SAMR layout, but I couldn't resist putting a ticket taker in the box office there. I chose movies that were around in the 1950s. So the robe is what's showing there with Richard Burton and Gene Simmons, and you can't see it, but the inside, the Coming Soon, is another movie that came out almost right after the robe did in 1950. So, but I'm just showing you the facade because the rest of it is just all cardboard. You won't see it on the layout because it's right up against another building. So this took about maybe a month to do, piece by piece. I broke it down into pieces to get it done. There's a lot more detail, obviously, on the Rio building than I could actually model. I don't have the artistic skills to get all of the details, like above the top set of windows there. You can see there's quite a bit of detail there in the concrete castings, or the so I did the best I could with what I could do, and it'll be far enough away from the aisle that you won't be able to see that kind of detail anyway if they use it on the layout. But that's the Palace Theater. I'll be using the theater sign, I hope, on March 29th to show how I took the photograph and one of Walther's sign kit signs and made it bigger, so possibly it'll work on the front of this building.
I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
Yeah,
Great job.
absolutely. That sign is just really going to be something on that building.
Well, I couldn't find a font that matched that particular font. I don't know whether I will use the, you've seen those signs on felt boards that have, the letters for, a person's office number or whatever in the front of a building. Some of those, I have some of those, but they're sans serif. That sign is a serif type of font, and the closest I could come is something called Algerian, and it's similar to it, but it's not exactly the same. And I've looked all over to try to find that particular font, and I just can't find it. Evidently, it was around in the 50s or the 40s, because that's when that sign went up. But I can't find the font.
Huh.
Yeah, they ended up grandfathering a lot of fonts from both the Art Deco period and the wartime period, because printers started coming out with new fonts so fast, and some of the older ones just fell by the wayside. But I'm sure that if you get it, just spelling it out with a serif font, it'll be close enough that most people will go, that's fantastic, even if it isn't a perfect match for it.
Well, you can see that the actual letters stand out from the sign, but obviously you're not going to find that today unless you get your number 11 blade out and make your own.
Well, or you could find some laser cutter that might, for a price, obviously be willing to come up with a font that's pretty close and do laser cut of them into maybe some something that's very thin.
Right.
Craft plywood or something, but that probably wouldn't be cheap.
I'm not sure the club wants to spend the money on that.
Yeah. I also like that you have a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Those were my favorites.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, very nice. All right, any questions for Father Ron? Comments? Alrighty. Quiet audience tonight, but all right, thanks, Father Ron. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we will turn it back over to Jim. And oh, by the way, don't forget about next month is the themed challenge. So
April 26th.
Yep.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Chris. And everybody that presented tonight. Thank you so very much. You know, I heard something today that I never heard about before. Maybe you all have. There in the grade schools, the 3rd grade through the 6th grade here locally, the libraries here have bought kits that explain to the kids how to do the STEM programs, the engineering, the math, and that kind of thing. And it's designed for kids, the 3rd grade through the 6th grade. And I thought, I wonder if there are kits that manufacturers make in model railroading that could serve that kind of purpose. Because if there is, then that might be an easy way to try to introduce the kids of today into model railroading, and at the same time into the different programs involved with STEM education. Anybody have any ideas or thoughts about how that might happen? What kind of kits, or are there kits out there that that could serve that purpose in the libraries around the country or the school systems around the country?
Actually, there's a company called Quick Kick. I don't know whether any of you watch the guy from Mythbusters, Adam Savage. He's done a couple of those quick kits. You can buy these kits online, and they actually teach the kids how to put these kits together. And they're very creative. You can use, they have like a lamp for your desk. They have a tray that you can put your books on. They have all kinds of different activities for that are STEM oriented. I was going to look it up for you and put it in the chat.
Your group out in Texas, are you all involved in that program, Father?
No.
Anybody else have any ideas along those lines? Well, Father, I appreciate it. I just never heard of any manufacturer out there, doing that. And when I found out about this, I thought, well, boy, if we could do that, that would sure be an easy way to introduce the hobby of model railroading, at a very young age, it seems to me. But at any rate, that's basically our show for this evening. We do have a caboose for you. And before we run the caboose, Phil at home has a message that he'd like to tell you about. Phil?
Yeah, guys, this is Phil. Hey, so this caboose is actually a video that was shot by TSG of the HO layout at the club I'm part of. I got it for doing some other videos there. But what the thought process was really simple. Most of you have a video you shot of your layout or a modular group or something like that. Why don't you find one of those clips? We're only looking for something that's 30 seconds, a minute long. Doesn't need to be a 15-minute movie. Doesn't need to be, we just had the Oscars. Doesn't need an Oscar aspirational movie. Just, a short clip that you're proud of. Send it to me because, we're running out of these. And if you like them, they're kind of fun to see something. So anyway, with that, I'll throw it over to Pat, and Pat's going to go ahead and play tonight's caboose. Wrong one, Pat.
I don't have it, Phil.
Aha.
I lost it.
You lost it. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Now let me go find it here. Oh, well, I think we've had a problem here technically because I don't know what I did with it. Hang on.
We both lost it.
You guys
Yeah.
keep dropping those files on the
Oh, you
floor.
stop.
You know, it's just it's always a challenge with us.
Just grab
Believe
it.
Believe it or not, before the show, we had all this lined up. We played on,
Yeah, it's been,
Yeah.
and now they're gone. Mystery.
We got a
it's,
gremlin out there.
They're with all the lost socks from the dryer.
Yeah.
That's right, Father.
that's where everything goes is with the dryer. That's right. Here we go. Let's try this.
I should have it.
See if this works. And it's not playing because I think there must be something really going on weird with the
Somebody's playing tricks on us.
Well, I think that we've had the caboose for this evening,
I
guys.
think we've had, that was us. That was the
We
caboose.
just had
was
the caboose.
entertainment.
I hope you enjoyed Pat and Phil's caboose. But we will see you next week.
Oh,
Thank
man.
you so much for being here. Hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, hope you learned something. Thanks again for coming. Bye-bye.
That's weird.
Pat and Phil.
Make
Love
a
it.
great bunch, don't we?
I love it. Are we off? Is that recording?
Yes.
Got
Yeah,
it.
we're
Okay.
finished.
Phil, if you get a chance,